Captain Marcus Chen stood at the back of the crowded auction hall on Station Kepler 7, his worn leather jacket making him look more like a salvage runner than someone with serious credits to spend. The air buzzed with excitement as alien species from across 3 systems gathered to bid on decommissioned military vessels. Towering Vorthak traders clicked their mandibles nervously, while sleek Centaurian diplomats whispered among themselves in their melodic language. Marcus kept his hands in his pockets, watching the proceedings with the careful eye of someone who had learned to spot opportunity where others saw only trouble. The auctioneer, a rotund Balarian with purple skin and 4 arms, gestured enthusiastically as he presented each lot. Next, we have a beautiful Corvin destroyer, fully functional plasma batteries. Only 3 previous owners. The bidding war that followed was fierce, with the final price reaching well into the millions of credits. Marcus whistled low under his breath. These people had serious money to throw around. He had come here with a specific goal. His current ship, the aging freighter Rusty Nail, was on its last legs. The atmospheric processors were failing, the artificial gravity kept cutting out, and yesterday the food synthesizer had started producing something that looked like purple foam instead of coffee. He needed a replacement, and fast. His shipping contract with the Outer Rim colonies depended on reliable transport, and the Rusty Nail was anything but reliable these days. The auction continued through dozens of vessels. Each time Marcus raised his hand to bid, the price quickly spiraled beyond his modest savings. A Terran patrol boat went for 2 million credits. A Zephyrian scout ship sold for 3.5 million. Marcus began to wonder if this whole trip had been a waste of time and fuel. Then the auctioneer's voice took on a different tone, almost apologetic. "Lot number 47, he announced, consulting his tablet with visible reluctance. "The vessel designation Nightfall's Edge. This is a Terran experimental cruiser from the failed Prometheus project." A murmur went through the crowd, but not the excited kind that had accompanied the previous lots. This was the sound of discomfort, even fear. Marcus noticed several aliens shifting nervously, and a group of Centaurians actually got up and left the hall entirely. The massive view screen flickered to life, showing images of the vessel in question. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of anything else that had been auctioned today. It was sleek and predatory, painted in matte black with angular lines that seemed to cut through space itself. The hull was unmarked except for faded Terran military insignia and the name Nightfall's Edge, written in stark white letters along its side. "As you can see," the auctioneer continued, his voice betraying his nervousness, "this is a significant vessel. However, there are certain complications. The ship was part of an experimental program that was terminated after incidents. It has been in storage for 15 years, and its systems are largely unknown. The previous attempt to study the vessel resulted in the research team requesting immediate transfer to other assignments." More aliens were leaving now. Marcus watched a Corvin delegation practically flee toward the exit, their usually confident demeanor replaced by something approaching panic. Whatever this ship was, it had a reputation that preceded it. "The vessel is sold as is, with no guarantees regarding functionality, safety, or other considerations. The starting bid is set at 500,000 credits. Silence fell over the auction hall like a heavy blanket. Marcus counted the seconds. 5, 10, 15. Nobody was bidding. The auctioneer looked increasingly uncomfortable, repeatedly glancing at his tablet as if hoping the numbers would change. "Do I hear 500,000? The Balarian asked hopefully. Nothing. "Perhaps 400,000? Still nothing. Marcus could practically see the sweat beading on the alien's purple forehead. 300,000? This was it. This was his chance. Marcus had exactly 250,000 credits to his name. His entire life savings plus the money he'd get from selling the rusty nail for scrap. It was a massive gamble, but something about the ship called to him. Maybe it was the way the other species reacted to it, or maybe it was the desperate situation he found himself in. But Marcus felt a strange certainty that this was meant to be his ship. 200,000, he called out, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Every head in the auction hall turned to look at him. The remaining aliens stared as if he had just announced his intention to juggle live plasma grenades. The auctioneer blinked his 4 eyes in rapid succession, clearly surprised to hear any bid at all. "We have 200,000 from the human gentleman in the back," the auctioneer announced, his voice betraying relief. "Do I hear 250? The silence stretched on. Marcus could feel the weight of dozens of alien gazes, most filled with something between pity and horror. A few Vorthak traders whispered frantically among themselves, but none raised their hands to bid. "Going once for 200,000 credits," the auctioneer called. "Going twice." He paused, scanning the crowd one final time. "Sold to the human bidder for 200,000 credits." The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot, and Marcus realized his life had just changed forever. As he walked forward to complete the paperwork, he caught fragments of conversation in various alien languages. Most of it was incomprehensible, but he picked up enough standard to understand the general sentiment. Crazy human doesn't know what he's bought. That ship is cursed. The Terrans built something they couldn't control. Nobody who boards that vessel comes back the same. Marcus signed the transfer documents with steady hands, despite the growing knot of anxiety in his stomach. The Balarian auctioneer handed him the access codes and ship's documentation with obvious reluctance, as if the papers themselves might be contaminated. "Sir," the alien said quietly, "are you quite certain about this purchase? The station's insurance policy explicitly excludes coverage for anything related to Prometheus Project vessels. We cannot be held responsible for any consequences." "I understand," Marcus replied, though he was beginning to wonder if he really did. "Where is the ship docked?" "Bay 94, Level 7, the restricted access level." The auctioneer's 4 eyes blinked nervously. "You'll need these authorization codes to get past station security. And, sir, the dock workers refuse to service vessels from the Prometheus Project. You'll need to handle all maintenance and preparations yourself." Marcus pocketed the codes and headed for the nearest transit tube, trying to ignore the stares that followed him. As the lift descended toward Level 7, he couldn't help but wonder what exactly the Prometheus Project had been. The name was vaguely familiar, something he'd heard whispered about in spacer bars and trading posts, but always in the context of things that were better left alone. Level 7 was markedly different from the bustling commercial levels above. The corridors were wider, built for military traffic, and the lighting was harsh and clinical. Security checkpoints were more frequent, and the few people Marcus encountered wore the serious expressions of those dealing with dangerous cargo. Bay 94 was at the end of a long corridor, isolated from the other docking bays by additional security barriers. Marcus presented his authorization codes to the automated scanner, and heavy blast doors slowly ground open to reveal the ship that was now his. Seeing Nightfall's Edge in person took his breath away. The auction images hadn't done it justice. The ship was massive, nearly 400 meters long, with a hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It squatted in the docking bay like a sleeping predator, all angles and aggressive lines. There were weapon ports that Marcus didn't recognize, sensor arrays that looked nothing like standard Terran technology, and hull plating that had an almost organic quality to its curves. As he approached the ship, Marcus noticed something strange. The station's usual background hum seemed muted here, as if the ship itself was somehow dampening sound. The temperature was noticeably cooler, and he could swear he felt a faint vibration through the deck plates, though the ship's systems should have been completely powered down. The main airlock was sealed, but his codes worked perfectly. As the outer door cycled open, Marcus stepped into a decontamination chamber that activated automatically. Red lights bathed him in an eerie glow, while invisible scanners checked him for everything from weapons to biological contaminants. After what felt like an eternity, the inner door opened with a soft hiss. The corridor beyond was dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast long shadows on the walls. Marcus activated the light on his handheld scanner, and the beam revealed a ship that was unlike anything in his experience. The corridors were wider than necessary, with a hexagonal cross-section that felt somehow alien despite being of Terran origin. The walls were covered in panels that looked like standard ship systems, but arranged in patterns that made no logical sense. As he explored deeper into the ship, Marcus began to understand why the research team had requested transfers. This wasn't just an experimental vessel. It was something else entirely. The bridge, when he finally found it, was a masterpiece of incomprehensible design. There were control stations that seemed designed for beings with more than 2 arms, displays that showed symbols he'd never seen before, and a captain's chair that looked more like a medical scanner than furniture. But it was the central display that made Marcus stop in his tracks. A massive holographic projector dominated the center of the bridge, currently inactive but clearly capable of displaying 3-dimensional star charts and tactical information on a scale he'd never imagined. Whatever this ship had been designed for, it wasn't simple cargo transport or even standard military operations. Marcus spent hours exploring the ship, finding quarters that could house a crew of hundreds, cargo bays large enough to hold entire buildings, and engineering sections that contained technology he couldn't even begin to understand. Every system he tried to access was locked behind security protocols that required clearance levels he didn't possess. The ship's computer, when he finally managed to establish a basic connection, spoke to him in a voice that was unmistakably artificial, yet somehow more alive than most ship AIs he'd encountered. "Welcome aboard Nightfall's Edge," the computer said, its voice echoing through the empty bridge. "I am Aria, Autonomous Reasoning and Intelligence Architecture. You are not an authorized crew member. Please state your purpose." "I'm Marcus Chen, the new owner," he replied, feeling slightly foolish, talking to the empty air. "I just bought this ship at auction." There was a long pause before Aria responded. "Scanning legal databases. Purchase confirmed. Captain Chen, I am required to inform you that this vessel contains classified technologies and classified mission parameters. Full access requires authorization from Terran Military Command." "What kind of mission parameters?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "I am not authorized to discuss classified mission parameters with unauthorized personnel," Aria replied with what sounded almost like regret. "However, I am permitted to provide basic ship operations and maintenance guidance. Would you like to begin with a systems overview?" Marcus nodded, then realized the computer couldn't see him. "Yes, let's start there." What followed was the most confusing hour of Marcus's life. Aria walked him through systems that defied everything he thought he knew about spacecraft design. The power core wasn't fusion-based like every other human ship. It was something called a quantum resonance matrix that apparently drew energy from subspace itself. The engines weren't standard plasma drives, but dimensional fold generators capable of bending space around the ship for faster-than-light travel without entering hyperspace. "Aria," Marcus said finally, his head spinning with information he barely understood. "What exactly was this ship built to do?" "That information is classified," Aria replied. "However, I can tell you that Nightfall's Edge was designed for long-range reconnaissance in hostile territory, with emphasis on survival in situations where conventional vessels would be immediately destroyed." The words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He was beginning to understand why the other bidders had fled the auction hall. This wasn't just an experimental ship. It was a weapon of war, designed for missions so dangerous that normal ships couldn't even attempt them. As the station's artificial night cycle began, Marcus found himself sitting in the captain's chair, staring out at the docking bay through the bridge's massive viewports. He had bought this ship hoping for a simple cargo hauler to replace his aging freighter. Instead, he had acquired something that the Terran military had built in secret and then apparently abandoned in fear. The smart thing to do would be to turn around, walk away, and try to sell the ship to someone with the resources and expertise to handle it properly. But as Marcus sat in the darkness, feeling the subtle vibrations of the ship's systems around him, he realized he couldn't do that. Something about Nightfall's edge called to him, whispered that this was his destiny. He had always been drawn to the unknown, to the spaces between the stars where anything might be waiting. This ship, whatever its secrets, was his key to adventures he had never imagined possible. The fact that it terrified experienced spacers and military researchers only made it more intriguing. "Area," he said finally, "can you teach me to fly this ship?" "Basic piloting functions can be taught to any qualified spacer," the AI replied. "However, utilizing this vessel's full capabilities requires training and authorization that you do not currently possess." "Then let's start with the basics," Marcus said, settling back in the captain's chair. "I have a feeling we're going to be spending a lot of time together." As the station's lights dimmed around them, Marcus Chen began his education in the mysteries of Nightfall's edge, unaware that his decision to purchase the abandoned ship had set in motion events that would change not only his life, but the balance of power across the galaxy. The secrets hidden within the vessel's quantum-encrypted databanks were about to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting universe, and Marcus was the key that would unlock them all. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus Chen had taken ownership of Nightfall's edge, and he was beginning to understand why the ship had remained in storage for 15 years. Every system he tried to learn presented new challenges that pushed the boundaries of his understanding. The ship's quantum resonance power core hummed with an energy that made his teeth ache, and the dimensional fold generators required calculations so complex that even Arya seemed to strain when running the computations. Marcus had moved his few belongings aboard and sold the rusty nail for scrap, burning his bridges in the most literal sense. There was no going back now. Station Kepler-7's dock workers continued to refuse service to his vessel, which meant he had to handle all maintenance and supplies himself. The irony wasn't lost on him that owning the most advanced ship in the sector had made simple tasks like restocking food supplies infinitely more complicated. "Captain," Arya announced, as Marcus finished his morning coffee in the ship's surprisingly well-appointed galley. "I have completed the diagnostic routines you requested. The results are concerning." Marcus set down his cup and made his way to the bridge. Over the past weeks, he had grown accustomed to Arya's habit of delivering bad news with understated calm. "What kind of concerning?" "Several critical systems show signs of active degradation. The quantum containment field is operating at 67% efficiency, down from 71% last week. The dimensional fold generators are experiencing harmonic resonance in the tertiary manifolds. Most troubling, the ship's primary firewall is reporting intrusion attempts from an unknown source." "Intrusion attempts!" Marcus dropped into the captain's chair, suddenly alert. "Someone's trying to hack the ship?" "Negative. The attempts appear to be originating from within the ship itself. Specifically from storage banks that I do not have access to. Captain, there are sections of this vessel that remain sealed even to me. My programming prevents me from accessing certain classified systems without proper authorization codes." Marcus had suspected as much. During his exploration of the ship, he had discovered entire decks that were sealed behind blast doors, marked with warnings in multiple languages. The symbols were universal for extreme danger, biological hazard, and something else he didn't recognize, but that made his skin crawl just looking at it. "What would happen if these sealed systems came online?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Unknown. However, the power requirements for the sealed sections suggest they contain technology that exceeds the output capacity of most star destroyers. Captain, I must advise that we seek immediate assistance from Terran Military Command. This vessel was not designed for civilian operation. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Area, I tried contacting Terran Military Command last week. They told me that all records related to the Prometheus project were classified above my security level, and that I should consider selling the ship to authorized buyers. When I asked who those buyers might be, they hung up on me. The AI was silent for a long moment, which Marcus had learned meant it was processing information at maximum capacity. Finally, Area spoke again, and there was something in its voice that sounded almost like confusion. Captain, I have just accessed a data packet that was triggered by your mention of selling the ship. It appears to be a message, recorded 15 years ago by the vessel's previous captain. Would you like me to play it? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Play it. The bridge's main display flickered to life, showing the image of a woman in a Terran military uniform. She looked exhausted, her eyes hollow with the kind of fatigue that came from seeing things that couldn't be unseen. Behind her, Marcus could see the same bridge he was sitting in, but it was different somehow. Brighter. More alive. If you're watching this, the woman said, her voice steady despite the obvious strain, then you've somehow gained access to Nightfall's Edge, and God help you for that. My name is Captain Sarah Voss, and I was the commanding officer of this vessel during what the brass called the Prometheus Project. What I'm about to tell you violates about 40 different classification levels, but I don't think that matters anymore. The image flickered, and when it stabilized, Captain Voss looked directly into the camera as if she could see across 15 years into Marcus's eyes. This ship was built to hunt gods. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Area. Pause the recording. I cannot comply, Captain. The message is encoded with quantum encryption that prevents interruption once playback has begun. Captain Voss continued speaking, her words measured and careful. In 2387, long-range scouts reported contact with entities in the Void Nebula that defied all known laws of physics, beings that could manipulate matter and energy with their thoughts alone, that existed partially outside our dimension, that treated the laws of causality as suggestions rather than absolutes. Command classified them as Class Omega threats and authorized the Prometheus Project to develop countermeasures. The display shifted to show technical schematics that made Marcus's head spin. Ships that looked like Nightfall's Edge, but even more alien, weapons that seemed to tear holes in reality itself, and containment systems that appeared to be designed to hold pieces of living space. We built 7 ships like this one, Voss continued. Each one was equipped with technology reverse-engineered from artifacts we found in dead systems, worlds where these entities had passed through and left nothing but empty space and twisted physics. The ships were designed to enter the Void Nebula, make contact with the entities, and determine whether they posed a threat to human space. Marcus realized he was gripping the arms of the captain's chair hard enough to leave marks in the metal. This was worse than anything he had imagined. He had bought a ship designed to fight beings that could rewrite reality. 5 of the 7 ships never returned from the nebula, Captain Voss said, her voice growing quieter. The 6th came back, changed. The crew had been transformed into something that wasn't quite human anymore. They could see through walls, predict events before they happened, and when they spoke, reality seemed to shift around their words. We had to destroy them. The image of Captain Voss flickered again, and when it stabilized, Marcus could see tears in her eyes. Nightfall's Edge was the only ship that completed its mission and returned intact. We made contact with one of the entities, and what we learned... She paused, taking a shaky breath. They're not hostile. They're not even really aware of us most of the time. To them, we're like bacteria, so small and brief that we barely register. But they're dying. Marcus felt the universe shift around him. This wasn't a story about weapons or war. This was something else entirely. The entities are the last remnants of a civilization that existed before the Big Bang, in a previous iteration of the universe. They survived the collapse and rebirth of reality itself, but each cosmic cycle weakens them. They've been traveling through space for billions of years, trying to find a way to preserve themselves as their life force slowly ebbs away. Captain Voss leaned forward, her eyes intense with desperate conviction. The artifacts we found weren't weapons, they were gifts. Technology designed to help younger species survive what they couldn't. But Command saw only the power, not the purpose. They ordered us to return to the nebula and capture one of the entities for study. Marcus felt sick. He could see where this story was going. We refused. The entities had shown us glimpses of what was coming. Cosmic events that would make the heat death of the universe look like a minor inconvenience. They were trying to prepare us, to give us the tools we would need to survive what they call the final dark. But Command couldn't see past the immediate military applications. The recording flickered, and Marcus could hear alarms blaring in the background. Captain Voss looked over her shoulder, then back at the camera with desperate urgency. "They're coming for the ship. I've triggered the lockdown protocols and hidden the entity's gift in the sealed sections. The access codes are encoded in the quantum signature of anyone who shows true understanding of our mission. If you're watching this, that means the ship has accepted you as its new captain." She stood up, and Marcus could see other crew members moving frantically behind her, preparing for what looked like a siege. "The entity gave us more than technology. It gave us a purpose. Humanity isn't ready to face the final dark alone, but together with the other surviving species, we might have a chance. The tools are all here, waiting for someone brave enough to use them. But be warned, once you unlock the sealed sections, there's no going back. You'll see the universe as it really is, vast and beautiful and terrible beyond imagination." The image began to break up, dissolving into static. Captain Voss's final words came through barely audible. "Good luck, Captain. The fate of everything depends on what you do next." The display went dark, leaving Marcus alone with his racing thoughts and the gentle hum of Nightfall's Edge's incomprehensible systems. For several minutes, he sat in absolute silence, trying to process what he had just learned. He had bought a ship designed to communicate with cosmic entities older than the universe itself. He was apparently the guardian of technology that could save or damn entire civilizations. "Arya," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Did you know about any of this?" "Negative, Captain. However, the message has triggered access to previously sealed databanks. I am now detecting quantum signatures that match the authorization protocols Captain Voss mentioned. It appears the ship has indeed accepted you as its rightful commander." Marcus closed his eyes and tried to think. He was just a cargo hauler, a simple trader who had been looking for a reliable ship to transport goods between colonies. Instead, he had somehow become the heir to a cosmic conspiracy that spanned billions of years. The smart thing to do would be to abandon the ship and walk away, but even as the thought crossed his mind, he knew he couldn't do it. "Show me the sealed sections," he said quietly. "Captain, I must advise—" "Show me." The bridge displays came alive with schematics showing the parts of Nightfall's Edge that had been hidden from him. Entire decks filled with technology that looked more like art than machinery. Laboratories designed for experiments that pushed the boundaries of known science. And at the heart of it all, a chamber that appeared to contain a piece of space that wasn't quite connected to the rest of the universe. The central containment facility houses what the entity called a reality anchor, Arya explained, its voice filled with something that might have been awe. It maintains a stable reference frame that allows the ship to operate in areas where normal physics break down. The surrounding laboratories contain tools for manipulating matter at the quantum level, for communicating across dimensional barriers, and for other purposes that my programming cannot fully comprehend. Marcus stood up and walked to the main viewport, staring out at the mundane docking bay beyond. Just hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether he could afford to restock the ship's food synthesizers. Now he was contemplating responsibilities that spanned geological timescales. "If I unlock these systems," he asked, "what happens next?" "Unknown. However, based on the data I can now access, the ship will begin receiving communications from elsewhere. The entity that gave Captain Voss the technology is still alive, still traveling through space. It has been waiting for someone to activate the systems and continue the work." Marcus made his decision with the sudden clarity that comes when all other options have been exhausted. He was in too deep to turn back now, and something about the story Captain Voss had told resonated with him on a level deeper than logic. Maybe it was the loneliness in her voice when she spoke about entities older than stars, or maybe it was the simple fact that someone needed to carry on the work she had started. "Arya, begin the unlock sequence." "Captain, I must warn you that once this process begins, it cannot be reversed." "Are you certain you wish to proceed?" Marcus thought about the aliens who had fled the auction hall when Nightfall's Edge was offered for sale. He thought about the research team that had requested immediate transfers rather than study the ship. He thought about Captain Voss and her crew who had sacrificed their careers and possibly their lives to protect something they believed was more important than any individual fate. "I'm certain. Begin the sequence." The bridge lights dimmed as power flowed to systems that had been dormant for 15 years. Deep within the ship, Marcus could hear the sound of massive blast doors opening for the first time in over a decade. The quantum resonance generator's hum changed pitch, becoming something that seemed to resonate in his bones rather than his ears. "Unlock sequence initiated," Arya announced. "Estimated completion time, 6 hours. Captain, I am now detecting incoming transmissions on frequencies that should not exist. Whatever is about to happen, I believe our quiet life as a cargo transport vessel has come to an end." Marcus settled back into the captain's chair and prepared to meet his destiny. Outside, the normal bustle of Station Kepler 7 continued, oblivious to the fact that one of its docked vessels was about to make contact with beings older than the galaxy itself. Whatever happened next, Marcus knew that his simple life as a cargo hauler was over. He was about to become something else entirely, though he couldn't yet imagine what that might be. The transformation of Nightfall's Edge took exactly 6 hours and 14 minutes. Marcus watched from the bridge as systems he had never seen before came online, filling the ship with patterns of light that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his eyes could properly process. When it was over, he was no longer sitting in a Terran military vessel. He was aboard something that existed partially outside normal space-time, a bridge between the universe he knew and realms of existence he was only beginning to understand. "Arya," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the transformed bridge. "What just happened to us?" "The ship has achieved full operational status," the AI replied, though its voice now carried harmonics that seemed to speak directly to his thoughts. "All systems are functioning within expected parameters. We are receiving communications from the entity designated Keeper of the Final Light." The main display shimmered, and suddenly Marcus was looking at something that challenged his sanity. The entity that appeared before him wasn't really there in any physical sense. It existed as patterns of light and thought that his brain struggled to interpret. Sometimes it looked like a star given consciousness, sometimes like geometric shapes that folded through impossible angles. But when it spoke, its voice was gentle, ancient beyond measure, and filled with the weight of cosmic loneliness. "Young Captain," it said, and Marcus felt the words resonate in his bones. "I have waited so long for someone to reactivate the gift ship. Your species shows much promise, though your lives are brief as stellar flame." Marcus found his voice. Though speaking to a being older than his solar system required every ounce of courage he possessed. "Captain Voss said you were trying to prepare us for something called the Final Dark. What is that?" The entity's form shifted, and for a moment Marcus saw an image that made him understand why Captain Voss had looked so haunted. It was the universe itself, but dying. Stars going out not from age, but from something that consumed light itself. Galaxies falling silent as the fundamental forces that held them together simply stopped working. "Reality grows tired," the Keeper explained. "Each iteration of the universe becomes weaker, less able to sustain the complexity that gives rise to consciousness. The Final Dark is not merely the heat death your scientists predict. It is the moment when existence itself loses the will to continue." Marcus felt his worldview crumble and rebuild itself around this new understanding. "How long do we have?" "In your measurements, perhaps 50 million years. A moment by cosmic standards, but enough time, if the surviving species work together, to prepare. That is why we have given gifts to those with the wisdom to use them." The display shifted again, showing a map of the galaxy that revealed points of light scattered across dozens of systems. Each point, Marcus realized, represented another species that had received similar gifts, though none quite like Nightfall's Edge. "The ship you command is unique," the Keeper continued. "It serves as a nexus, a point where the gift-bearers can gather and share their knowledge. But first, you must prove that humanity deserves to survive what is coming." "How do I do that?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "There are others who have received fragments of the ancient technology. Some use it wisely, preparing their species for the trials ahead. Others seek only power, twisting the gifts into weapons of conquest. You must find these corrupted gift-bearers and either redeem them or stop them before they doom their entire civilizations." Arya's voice cut through the cosmic conversation. "Captain, I am detecting multiple ships approaching Station Kepler 7. Configuration suggests Corvan military vessels, along with what appears to be a Vorthak dreadnought. They are requesting permission to board." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. The Corvans and Vorthak had both been at the auction, and both had fled when Nightfall's Edge was offered for sale. Their sudden return couldn't be a coincidence. "They know," he said, understanding flooding through him. "They know what this ship really is." The Keeper's form rippled with what might have been approval. "The first test comes sooner than expected. The Corvan Empire received a gift ship 70 years ago, but they have used its technology only to build weapons and expand their territory. The Vorthak hegemony acquired fragments of another gift 15 years past, and have become obsessed with using them to achieve immortality for their ruling caste." "They want this ship," Marcus realized. "They want to combine their gifts with mine." "Yes, and if they succeed, they will have enough power to enslave entire star systems. The Corvans seek to build an empire that spans the galaxy, while the Vorthak wish to become gods, ruling over immortal slaves. Neither outcome would serve the greater purpose." The communication channel crackled as Station Kepler 7's traffic control contacted Nightfall's Edge. "Captain Chen, this is Station Control. You have 30 minutes to prepare for inspection by representatives of the Corvan Empire and the Vorthak hegemony. This is not a request." Marcus looked at the tactical display Arya was now projecting. 3 Corvan destroyers and a massive Vorthak dreadnought had the station completely surrounded. There was nowhere to run, and his ship, powerful as it might be, was still docked and vulnerable. "Arya, how long before we can launch?" Undocking procedures require 12 minutes under normal circumstances. However, I can initiate emergency departure protocols and have us clear of the station in 3 minutes. Do it. As Nightfall's Edge began its emergency undocking sequence, Marcus felt the ship's systems responding to his intentions in ways that went beyond normal command interfaces. It was as if the vessel was reading his thoughts and anticipating his needs. The docking clamps released with explosive force, and the ship shot out of the station's bay like a bullet from a gun. "Incoming transmission from the Corvin flagship," Arya announced. The display showed a Corvin commander, his insectoid features twisted with rage. "Human vessel, you have stolen property that belongs to the Empire. Surrender immediately, or we will take it by force." Marcus almost laughed. A few weeks ago, he would have been terrified to face even a single Corvin destroyer. Now, with the knowledge the Keeper had shared flowing through his mind, he understood that Nightfall's Edge was more than capable of handling any conventional fleet. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the vessel Nightfall's Edge," he replied formally. "The ship was purchased legally at public auction. I suggest you file a complaint with Station Kepler 7's administration." The Corvin commander's mandibles clicked with fury. "You do not understand the forces you are dealing with, human. The technology aboard that ship belongs to those with the wisdom to use it properly. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." Marcus cut the transmission and turned to the tactical display. The enemy ships were moving to surround him, their weapons charging for what they clearly expected to be a simple execution. They had no idea what they were really facing. "Arya, can you show me how the ship's defensive systems work?" "Certainly, Captain. However, I should warn you that activating the primary weapons will reveal capabilities that may fundamentally alter the balance of power in this sector." "Show me everything." What followed was a crash course in technology that violated several laws of physics. Nightfall's Edge wasn't armed with conventional weapons. Instead, it carried devices that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Gravity weapons that could crush ships like tin cans. Energy cannons that fired coherent beams of dark matter. And at the ship's core, something called a reality disruptor that could temporarily disconnect enemy vessels from the normal flow of causality. The ship also carries defensive systems that operate on similar principles, Arya explained as the enemy fleet closed in. Temporal shields that can slow incoming projectiles to near immobility, quantum armor that phases the ship partially out of normal space, and emergency systems that can transport the vessel instantly to any location within several light years. Marcus felt the weight of the decision before him. If he used these weapons, there would be no going back. He would announce to the galaxy that humanity possessed technology beyond anything previously imagined. The political ramifications alone could start wars that would span generations. But as he watched the Corvin and Vorthak ships moving to attack positions, he realized he didn't have a choice. They had already decided to take his ship by force. The only question was whether he would defend himself or allow them to capture technology that could doom the galaxy. "Target the lead Corvin destroyer," he ordered. "Fire a warning shot with the gravity cannon." The universe seemed to hiccup. Space itself twisted around the Corvin vessel, and for a moment the destroyer existed in a gravitational field so intense that its hull began to collapse inward. Then the effect dissipated, leaving the ship damaged but intact, its crew undoubtedly wondering what had just happened to them. The response was immediate. All 4 enemy vessels opened fire simultaneously, filling space with plasma bolts, particle beams, and kinetic projectiles. None of them reached Nightfall's Edge. The ship's temporal shields activated automatically, slowing the incoming weapons to a crawl. From Marcus's perspective, the enemy fire looked like deadly fireworks moving through thick syrup. "Return fire," he said quietly. "Disable their weapons, but try not to destroy them completely." What happened next would be talked about in spacer bars for generations. Nightfall's Edge seemed to dance through space, moving in ways that conventional ships simply couldn't match. Its weapons fired beams that bent the laws of physics, targeting the enemy vessel's weapon systems with surgical precision. Within minutes, the proud Corvin and Vorthak fleet was reduced to a collection of powerless hulks drifting through space. Marcus opened a communication channel to all 4 ships simultaneously. "This is Captain Chen. Your vessels are disabled but intact. Your life support systems are undamaged. I suggest you use this opportunity to reconsider your approach to diplomatic relations." The Vorthak Dreadnought's commander was the first to respond, his multiple eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and calculation. "What are you, human? What manner of ship do you command?" Marcus looked at the display showing the keeper of the final light, who had observed the entire battle in silence. The ancient entity's form rippled with what might have been approval. "I'm someone who just inherited a very big responsibility," Marcus replied. "And you're someone who has been misusing gifts that were meant to prepare us all for something much worse than any war between our species." Over the next several hours, as rescue ships arrived to assist the disabled vessels, Marcus found himself in the strangest negotiation of his life. With the Keeper providing context and Arya translating between species, he began to explain to the Corvin and Vorthak commanders exactly what their stolen technology was really meant for. The revelation that their civilizations had been given tools to survive cosmic annihilation rather than weapons for conquest came as a shock to both alien species. The Corvin Empire's expansion had been driven by desperation, a subconscious understanding that they needed to spread their species as widely as possible. The Vorthak obsession with immortality stemmed from similar instincts, a deep-seated fear that time was running out. "The final dark approaches whether we are prepared or not," Marcus told the assembled commanders via holoconference. "We can spend the next 50 million years fighting over scraps of technology we don't understand, or we can work together to build something that might actually survive what's coming." The Corvin commander, whose name was roughly translated as Sharp Claw of Victory, was the first to respond. "You speak of cooperation between species that have been enemies for centuries. What makes you think such a thing is possible?" Marcus smiled, thinking of all the alien species that had fled the auction hall when his ship was offered for sale. "Because sometimes the things that scare us most are the things we need most. You were afraid of this ship because you sensed its true purpose. Now you have a choice. Embrace that purpose or keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight for." The negotiations continued for days, with representatives from dozens of species arriving to witness the birth of what would eventually be called the Final Light Coalition. Not every species chose to join. Some, too committed to their current conflicts or too afraid of change, refused to believe that the final dark was real. But enough agreed to participate that Marcus began to hope they might actually have a chance. The Keeper of the Final Light, speaking through Nightfall's Edge's communication systems, provided guidance and context as the various species shared their fragments of ancient technology. The Corvins had weapons that could crack planets, but when combined with Vorthak life extension technology and human adaptability, those same forces could be used to rearrange solar systems for optimal long-term survival. As Marcus watched the first joint research station being constructed using technologies from a dozen different species, he marveled at how far he had come from his simple dream of replacing an aging cargo freighter. He was now the captain of the most advanced vessel in known space and the unofficial leader of a coalition that spanned hundreds of worlds. "Arya," he said one evening as he stood on the bridge watching alien ships working together in ways that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. "Do you think we actually have a chance of surviving this final dark?" The AI was quiet for a moment before responding. "Captain, I have been analyzing the combined technological resources of the coalition species, cross-referenced with the data the Keeper has provided about previous cosmic cycles. The probability of survival has increased from effectively 0 to approximately 12%. Marcus laughed. 12%? That's it? Captain, consider that before the Prometheus project, the probability was 0%, and that was before humanity demonstrated its remarkable talent for exceeding expectations. I believe our chances will continue to improve as more species join the coalition and as we develop better understanding of the ancient technologies. Looking out at the stars, Marcus felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced as a simple cargo hauler. The universe was vast and dangerous and filled with wonders he was only beginning to understand. But for the first time in cosmic history, the younger species weren't facing the ultimate darkness alone. 50 million years was a long time, even by cosmic standards. It was long enough to build wonders that would make the current galactic civilizations look like crude experiments. Long enough to spread life and consciousness to every corner of the universe. Long enough, perhaps, to find a way to survive even the death of reality itself. Marcus Chen had bought a ship at auction because he needed reliable transportation. Instead, he had acquired the keys to the future of consciousness itself. As Nightfall's Edge set course for the next coalition gathering, carrying hope and ancient wisdom to species that had never dared to dream they might survive forever, Marcus realized that sometimes the best bargains were the ones that looked like the worst possible deals. The final dark was coming, but it would not find the younger species unprepared, and at the center of their preparations, a former cargo hauler and his impossible ship would ensure that the light of consciousness would burn long after the last star had died.